Well, good evening, everyone. It is Wednesday, the 14th of November, 7 p.m., and this is Kristen, and I am here to talk to you about my experience with domestic violence. I don't know how many of you have ever had experience with domestic violence, so this is going to be kind of a frank discussion, and I've never really done a go live before, so I apologize in advance if I stink at it. And I am certainly open for people to post questions and so forth, but I don't know how good I will be about getting to them, so I'll do the best that I can. A couple of disclaimers about what I am going to talk about and what I hope this doesn't turn into. This is not intended to be a pity party for Kristen. This isn't, I don't need that. And I don't want that. So what it is going to be is a frank discussion about what abuse is. So I will definitely be sharing from my own experience of abuse. So you will hear stories of what I actually went through. However, I want that to be a shorter portion of the discussion because I don't want to give that much power to the past and to the abuse. I'd really rather talk about moving forward and where we all go from here, moving on. I also want to preface this by saying this isn't rehearsed. So I have a short outline that I will look at occasionally because, as some of you who are on the call know me, I can wander with my thoughts. And I want to make sure that we stick to what we want to talk about. And I feel really kind of good about things at the moment, but I will tell you that in 20 years, this is the first time that I've really been completely open and honest about that experience. So it isn't that other people in my life didn't know that these things happened to me. They may not have known all of the details, and they certainly didn't really I never gave anyone really a close-in look into what the effect it had on me was. So, so we'll see how that goes. I do have Kleenex in case I get emotional, but I'm not, at the moment, I'm not anticipating that. So, but if I do, just stick with me and we'll all get through it together. So all of that having been said, I'm gonna dive right in. So I encourage you to think in your mind what abuse looks like. What someone who has been abused looks like. And I think that growing up, the image that we got were lower socioeconomic class or something in sort of a drug culture, or I think we had all of these images that these poor women were suffering the hands of these tyrannical abusers. And I want you to take a really good look. I want you to look right into the screen, look right into my eyes, and take a minute and soak it in, because this is the face of an abused person. And that's it. And it's probably not the face you were expecting. I don't know, a lot of people shared this Facebook Live with others, and so there will be people on this that I don't know, or this will get shared with people that I don't know. But by and large, looking at the folks who are checking in and watching me now, most of you know me, or did, I guess. There's that whole phenomenon of Facebook where I didn't see you for the last 30 years, but we're Facebook friends. But you knew me at some point in time. And what I have gotten on the few occasions where I've shared the fact that I have survived domestic abuse is, I never would have thought that would have happened to you. And we're going to kind of come back to that and the uselessness of that statement. But we're going to get through the hard and unpleasant stuff first. So I have a pretty unique experience when we talk about what constitutes abuse, because my particular abuser was an equal opportunity abuser who kind of hit me on all levels. So we're going to talk about that. What does that mean? So we're going to ease in a little bit and start with what I would consider sort of the easier abuses to hear about. And I'm sharing this because I'm not sharing this because I want you to feel bad for me. I'm sharing this because I think we hear about it and we can define what all of these different kinds of abuse are. But I think it's important for you to connect that with an actual person and to understand that this isn't a Hallmark made for TV movie, and this isn't something that's happening in that other neighborhood, and that this is something that is happening, and it's probably happening or has happened to some of the people that are joining this call. It happens everywhere. So my particular abuser, will start with the simple. He was verbally abusive. So for those of you that might be younger, especially, I think most of the adults on the call can wrap their head around that, but I think it's important for kids to know what that means, to be verbally abused. Verbal abuse means that I was talked to like I was an unimportant piece of garbage. So for instance, if I have a piece of trash in my house, I might say, this is a piece of crap and I'm going to throw it away. I was spoken to and told that I was a piece of crap. I was told that I was stupid. I was told that I was fat. I, at the time, was considering joining the military and was trying to train. And if any of you knew me from back in the day, I was never an athlete. And so running was a struggle for me. And I was told that I was a slow, fat pig, that I was pathetic, that I was ridiculous. And any other number of things. I was called a lot of really ugly names, and I want to keep this PG, so I'm not going to use those words on this video. I don't want to give those words any more power. But what I can tell you is I was called everything you can call someone. All the really good names that people save for women, I got called all of that. By someone who said he loved me. This wasn't someone random on the street. This was someone I lived with, who wanted to marry me, supposedly. So that's the easier part. So then we go up from there. I had the joy of being financially abused. So what does that mean? It's sort of a psychological abuse. So I was going through a divorce when I met my abuser and was in a rough time and period financially. And on regular occasions, we had an argument, and we had an argument on regular occasions. He said, fine, then I'm going to take everything. And he would go and take all the food out of the refrigerator. At one point, he packed up the microwave and said he was taking it all and he was leaving, and would leave me with nothing. He was abusive psychologically. So most of you, if you've lived on the East Coast or in mainland United States, this all happened to me when I lived in Hawaii. You're used to windows that slide up and down, maybe that open in and out. In Hawaii, and I've never seen them around here, they have an older style of window, and I can't remember what they're called, but they're kind of like mini blinds. So they're all different slats of windows, and they rock up and they rock down to open and close. So we would break up, in theory. I'd say, get out, I'm done with you, you have to leave. And I'd lock the door, and he'd pull the screen out and reach in and slide every one of the window panes out, because they're just held in by thin little brackets on the end, and break in and say, you can't keep me out. There's nothing you can do to get me out. On more than one occasion, I tried to call the police, and he would rip the phone cord out of the wall so that I couldn't call the police. And just let me know that I tried to get in the car and drive away, and he got in the car with me. He wouldn't let me leave. That was if I could get out the door. The amount of times he blocked me from getting out the door were numerous. Property destruction. Took a baseball bat to the hood of my car and smashed up my car. Without getting into detail, there was sexual abuse, which isn't to say that I was raped. I don't think that that's what I would ever constitute, but sex was used as a weapon, and I was not made to feel good about it. My body was not made to feel good. Things like I wasn't given privacy. If I tried to use the bathroom as well, he would want to be in there. If it was my time of the month, he wanted to be a part of, and not like in any kind of way one can imagine this being cute, but he felt that he should be there to witness me taking care of my female needs. He wouldn't give me privacy where that was concerned. So a lot of mind games. So then let's get to the ugly. Let's talk about the physical abuse. What does that look like? So I don't want to put too fine a point on it. And I've realized looking over that my mom has logged in, so I'm sure this is not a whole lot of fun for her. But he almost killed me on 2 separate occasions, actually 2 occasions in the same day. physical abuse is everything that you think it is. Physical abuse is somebody putting their hands on you in a dangerous and threatening way. So on one particular occasion, I got backhanded across the face. It dislocated my jaw. On another occasion, we got into an argument and he came tearing down the hall and slammed me up against a wall and wrapped his hands around my throat and was choking me and I couldn't breathe. And I don't honestly remember how I got out of that. And we'll talk about my reaction in a minute, but focusing just on that, later in that interaction, he reared back and headbutted me in the face and smashed my nose and broke my nose. Both of those occasions were life-threatening, to say the least. So those are some real-life examples of abuse. And on the one hand, I guess I could talk about that all day. I don't see the value in that, to be honest with you. I think that it's important for me to say it. So to say that this isn't therapeutic for me would be a lie. There's some part of me that needed to do this, whether this is some sort of strange online confessional, I don't know. But again, I think it's important for people to realize all the different ways they can be abused. This doesn't have to be a husband. Honestly, nowadays it can be a friend, because we have friends who put us down and make us feel bad and hurt us, and we don't know what we're supposed to do about it. So that's kind of the graphic part of it. And for those of you, I know some of you were planning to show this to your children, and I know there's some kids on the call. And if that all frightens you, I want to say it's frightening. So it's natural for you to be scared. I was scared. It's a scary thing. I'm shaking a little bit talking about it. It's hard for me to go back to that place and not still feel it and hear it and know what that was like. But we're all in a safe place right now. And together we don't have to be afraid. And I really want that to be sort of the message moving forward. But we're going to revisit some of the ugliness a little bit. But we're going to talk about what abuse does to somebody, because I think that we gloss over that. And I promise we'll get to the question that's burning on people's minds, which is always, why did you stay? And I promise we'll get to that. But I want to talk about what my experience in that abuse was like. So, and I say that very purposefully because I do believe, and research has shown that I'm right about this, that there are similarities across the spectrum of women who suffer abuse. And I'm going to focus on women right now just because that is the predominantly, at least reported, grouping of abuse. But I do definitely think that is shifting for all kinds of reasons, and I'll come back to that. For me, however, I had certain reactions that I don't think every woman does. So I don't think that you should listen to this and say, I now know what abused women feel like, because you don't. I'm also going to say this. The more you're going to try to, if you've never experienced abuse, if you've never been abused, never witnessed it firsthand, I'm going to just put your mind at ease right now. None of this is going to make sense to you. And that's not meant to be patronizing or hurtful in any way, but I use this expression all the time. You can't wrap sane around crazy, and you just can't. Every single part about what I went through and what every person who is in an abusive relationship goes through on both sides, the abuser and the abused, is crazy. It is dysfunctional and it is off the charts. And the more you try to wrap a sane mind around making sense of it, the more you're just going to be dumbfounded. And quite honestly, the less likely you're going to be able to actually be there for somebody, because inadvertently they're going to feel judged. So what I'm about to tell you, I definitely don't share with many people, but it is how I behaved during that time. And I think that this is particularly relevant because we're sort of in a society right now where violence is not only rampant, but we're so numb to it. And we're so almost expecting it. And when you've lived with it and it's sleeping in your bed, it changes your experience to violence very much. And when someone treats you less than the animals that you see on the ASPCA commercials, you become that animal. And my reaction, and that can be one of two things. You can become the cowering animal that just sort of shrinks. I did not shrink, and that's not a good thing, and that's not anything to be proud of. I was at the ugliest place in my life in that relationship because I fought back. And that might make some of you cheer and think, that's great, good for you. It's not great. It was stupid, and it almost got me killed. And it's not the solution. And what it does to you moving forward is insane. So how did I fight back? I became verbally abusive in response to the abuse. So I got really good at calling him stupid and telling him he was a failure and making him feel small. I knew what his inadequacies were. I knew what he felt bad about. And when he would get on me, I would instantly go on the attack, and I would needle all those things that I knew bothered him. And eventually that would provoke a physical response from him. If we go back to the moment when he was choking me, I genuinely have no memory of how I got away from that situation. I just know, I know the room I was in. I can see it in my head clear as day. And I know he was choking me against the wall. And I don't know how I got from there across the room and was sitting down, but I was. And he got in front of me and he wouldn't shut up about, I don't know what exactly, but about how stupid and worthless and dumb and ugly I was. And I saw an opening and I popped him in the neck. And that's when he reared back and headbutted me in the face and broke my nose. And I think about that. And I don't know what I'm supposed to tell you about that. It didn't save my life to fight back. That's not what saved my life. It didn't make the situation better. It didn't make him stop. It didn't even the score. It just lessened me. And quite frankly, it put me in greater danger. Does that mean that you shouldn't try to defend yourself if you're in that situation? Of course not. At the end of the day, the key is to survive. But I did myself no favors. And I don't recommend my course of action to anybody. So let's talk about the question that it comes up every time this comes up. Why did you stay? Stop trying to wrap your sane mind around my crazy. There is not an answer for that is going to satisfy you. So I will start with that. There is also not one answer to this question. And I'm going to tell you about a conversation I had. I will answer that, but I'm going to tell you about a conversation I had and what upset me. A couple years ago, and this is, I'm going to go off topic for just a second, but I promise we're swinging back around. So I am a New England Patriots fan, but I live in Baltimore Ravens territory. So a couple of years ago, you will all, if any of you are sports fan, will remember there was this huge scandal. Did New England Patriots know about deflated footballs? This was a big damn deal. Everybody talked about it. And after lots and lots and lots of research, the commissioner of football makes this declaration that they thought that it was likely that Tom Brady knew that footballs were being deflated. So it was likely, wasn't proven, nobody could confirm that. It was likely that he probably knew about it. So they suspended him for 4 games. Okay, fast forward. Ray Rice, a running back for the Baltimore Ravens, gets caught on tape knocking his girlfriend unconscious and dragging her lifeless body out of an elevator. And the initial reaction from football was to suspend him for 2 games. Now, I understand that all played out differently at the end and he got kicked out of football and yeah, whatever. But the initial reaction was that you maybe kind of sort of possibly knew about some potentially cheating element of football, gets you 4 suspensions, but you knock a woman unconscious and that only gets you 2. Think about that and let that settle in, because it actually feeds into why women don't leave. But that conversation, that discussing that, came up with a Baltimore Ravens fan of mine, a friend of mine from here. She's a fan of the Ravens. And I was sharing that as a woman, I was blown away that after that incident around town, you would see women wearing Baltimore Ravens jerseys with Ray Rice on them. And I couldn't understand that. And her reaction to me was, yeah, I mean, that was bad, but you got to ask yourself why she stayed. I mean, she probably just stayed for the money. And I damn near lost my mind. I don't even know where to begin with that. So why do women stay? Did she stay for the money? Maybe. I don't know her situation. I know I tried to get out of my house on countless times and had my access blocked. I know that I was threatened that if I could get a restraining order, I thought he was going to break it. But that's not why I stayed. I stayed personally. I don't know why Ray Rice's girlfriend or wife stayed. I'm not speaking for her, but I stayed because I could not accept what was happening to me. I refused to accept what was happening. I refused to believe that I was that girl. If you go back to where this started and I said to you, think in your mind what abused women look like, and then look at my face. I couldn't be that woman. I could not accept that. So I constructed an entire dialogue in my own mind about why I wasn't that woman. Everything about me was different. And in my own arrogance, I was going to fix it. I was going to make it right. I was going to fix him and make him right. And then everything would be justified. It's really, really faulty thinking. And a lot of crap feeds into that. So this need not to be the V word, victim. Being a victim, I don't know anybody who likes the word. I don't know anyone who wants to say that I'm a victim. It's a horrible word. It doesn't matter what has happened to you. Nobody wants to be a victim. So we will do anything to not be one. There's fear that keeps people in it. Fear of how much worse it could be to leave. I don't know the statistics. I used to know it, but I do know it is a life-threatening situation to leave an abuser. Because I don't know, we oversimplify the solutions. The solution isn't go get a TRO, go get a temporary restraining order. That is not the solution. A person who believes in his mind that I can beat the crap out of you because you washed a lipstick with the laundry is not the same person who's going to say, oh, a TRO. Right. So I can't come in the house and choke you blind. It doesn't work that way. It's a step. It's important. I'm not saying don't get one, but don't delude ourselves into thinking that that's the solution and everything would be fine. That isn't the solution. And then there's the reality that not everybody can leave financially. And I think that that played into it a little bit for me. And then some of you who know me have known me since elementary school and high school and college. You know my family. I don't come from an abusive family. I don't come from a broken home. We were middle class all the way. My father adored my mother. He did not give an example that this was how men were supposed to treat women and that women should be okay with it. There was never anything in my household that I would consider to be violent, and my parents have never given me any reason to think that I could not come home if I had a problem. But I couldn't do that. And my abuser, in good abuser fashion, did his very best to alienate me from my family. He got into arguments on the phone with my parents. He terrorized them on one particular occasion by they calling them and not saying anything and then not hanging up, and I mean like repeated like crank calls. And I was embarrassed about my divorce. I was embarrassed about how much I was struggling. It had built up that I was supposed to be a golden child in my own mind, and I couldn't go to them with this. And that's not a failing on anybody else's part but mine. And it's important for me to admit that. So a lot of times when I talk about my own failings, and I've tried to have that conversation with other people in my life, they immediately want to cut me off and say, no, it's all him. If I did that, then I have no power whatsoever. I have to learn so I can do something more moving forward. And you have to be honest with yourselves. And as the young women and men who you may share this with need to be honest with themselves to know, because I actually think that the kids who grow up really strong and really confident, sometimes if they find themselves in this situation, are going to find it harder to admit that they became that V word, that they became something that would disappoint the image that they had built up for themselves. So, and it's important to know that you don't ever have to do that. You don't ever have to be ashamed of something that happens to you against your will. And it is not your job to fix anybody. Anybody. I never needed to appoint myself the holy crusader in fixing this man's life. And certainly not from a place where I was in danger. And I was in danger. And that was just dumb. I mean, it was just dumb. So why was he an abuser? That's the other question that people raise a lot. Like, well, why did they do it? I know a little bit about his family history, and it's unique in its own way, and yet not. His biological mother was, I believe she had drug problems, but I don't 100% remember that, but she had emotional problems. I remember him telling me that. And she was abusive to others in her life, not specifically to him, and unfit. And her parents, his grandparents, actually, her rights got terminated and his biological grandparents adopted him. I don't know if he actually had any real relationship with his biological mother, but I met his adoptive mother, his grandmother. She was a wonderfully kind person, and he was raised in a household of love and support. Not raised to think that this was okay. His mother witnessed it on one particular occasion. The day that he dislocated my jaw, she was there for that. And she came to visit within days of him having broken my nose, because I remember I had to put makeup on. I was afraid she would see the bruises, and I didn't want to have to answer for them. And she was shocked, and yet all was made well, and we ended up going to a luau later that evening. So people accept the reality that they are presented with, because accepting the reality that is really in front of them, the ugliness, they just can't do it. They can't do it. And I don't know why. I don't know. He had his, I mean, you could go into every psychological handbook and say he had his own insecurities, and would it matter? Is there an answer of why they do it? Like, okay, well, now if we know that, we can cure that? Because you can't exactly, but you can try to cut it off at the pass. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So going a little all over the place, but I want to help those of you who are here to do one of two things, or maybe one of several things. What do you do? So many of my friends are raising young ones. And what do you do to help them not be in this situation? And what do I say if I see this? And I think that there's a few things to know. People do not want to get involved in this at all. The day that my nose was broken, I screamed bloody murder. If you've never had your nose smashed in, trust me, you don't have any choice but to scream bloody murder. And the neighbors were outside and they had come running, because remember, we have these crappy windows. And the neighbors came running and said, is everything going to be okay? Or is everything okay in there? And I couldn't barely breathe, let alone talk. And my abuser said, yeah, she's fine. And they walked away. We were renting the ground floor of a house, so we had neighbors upstairs. The neighbors upstairs called animal control because I had a dog, two in fact, but one in particular that I kept in a side yard of ours, and I hadn't picked up the poop in a while, and they called animal control on the fact that I hadn't picked up the poop. But they didn't call the police, not one time, in any of the arguments that we had. In any of the times I was screaming that I'm going to call the police, they did not. The neighbor across the street called the police on us when they believed that we walked our dog over there and let our dog go to the bathroom on her front lawn and didn't pick it up. Literally called the police, and when we explained that it wasn't our dog, actually took the poop and brought it over to our house and left it on our steps. But when my boyfriend is in the road beating the snot out of the hood of my car with a baseball bat, they didn't call the police. So understand that those messages get delivered to the woman in the house. You matter less than dog crap. Get involved. Don't be afraid to get involved. Don't be afraid to ask if everything's okay. Don't be afraid to empower somebody. And don't accept someone's BS. Don't accept when someone says, no, everything's fine, when you know that it isn't, or you think that it isn't. We've gotten so politically correct that we don't want to offend anybody. So what do? We do nothing. Ask. Make sure that your kids know that it's not their job to fix anybody's problems. That if someone has problems, sometimes the best way you can love them is to let them figure their stuff out for themselves and to keep themselves safe. That's not their job, and that it's not a reflection on them, that it's not lesser for them to take themselves out of that situation. It's not a failure. I think that for me personally, the notion of failing on the heels of a failed marriage, and failing in what I consider to be like this monumentally colossal way, was more than my ego would let me handle. And that's just stupid. I mean, it just is. So where does that leave everybody? Like, where do we go from here? What does that mean? So the victimizing is an interesting thing. You're a victim for a really long time. I got a lot of feedback when people heard I was going to do this, that they thought I was brave. And someone actually came up to me, I talked about it in my church, and someone had said to me, well, now I know you're even stronger than I thought. And I said, how's that? And she said, well, because you got out. I didn't actually get out because I was strong. I didn't get out because I was super smart. I got out because I was lucky. My ex was a Marine. And as luck would have it, he got sent to Japan. sort of unexpectedly, but not entirely unexpectedly. We had a couple weeks to prepare, but it wasn't huge notice. And we stayed together for a while. Um, but inevitably, I got an opportunity to make some friends and to feel like I didn't need him as much. And then I broke up with him in a letter because he was away and it was easy and I could do it. And it didn't actually end there. The only person in my life who ever got to be a witness to any of this was my friend Megan. And Megan and I were sort of living together at the time. I don't know if she was actually fully living with me then, but pretty close, if not. And when John had gotten deployed, they had to clear out their barracks, and I had a lot of stuff. And he had told me I could have it. He was like, yeah, everyone, they just have to get rid of this stuff so you can have it. And so he had given me some stuff, and then he showed up at my door wanting the stuff, and an argument ensued, and I told him to get out, and I tried to close the door, and he slammed into the door and knocked me backwards, knocked the door open, and drove me down to the ground and got on top of me and was, I don't know if he was hitting me or just wrestling with me, or I don't know, he was just doing what he was doing. And Megan was there. And she was the one who actually pulled him off of me. And then he never came back after that. But he continued. We all used to go country western dancing back in the day. And we all went out to Pearl Harbor, and he was always there. And so I got to see him a lot. And I got to see him flirt with and try to date other women. And I didn't know what to say to them because some of them I knew. And I didn't know how not to sound like this jealous ex-girlfriend and really just say that you should get away. And I would try, and I wasn't comfortable sharing my story then, so I would stumble through it. And I think I just came off as the jealous ex-girlfriend, and I don't think it ever actually helped anybody because there's this stigma about talking about it. And that is also stupid. But it is what it is. And where that has carried me through, and when I go back to how I acted like a caged animal and became abusive myself, that doesn't just go away. It isn't like, oh, so he's gone, life's better, I'm fine, let's move on. Whatever path my life was on, this all happened, I was around 26, give or take, 25, I don't know, somewhere in there. It was before 26 because it was before the year 2000. So let's say it was, I was 24 maybe. Yeah, that sounds right, because he was about 21 at the time. Whatever path I was on, that path is gone. When someone hits you, even if you have the wherewithal to not decide to fight, to not decide to stay, even if you're the woman or the man who gets out of that situation day one, that's it, you hit me, I'm out. Your life is forever changed. Because there's just something about somebody hitting you that changes your life. And mine is forever changed. I lost who I was for an easy decade of my life. I hid from so many things for so long. I accomplished a great many things during that time frame, and I minimized all of them. I have a very good friend named John who laughs at me all the time because I say that I just think I'm lazy. And he's like, you have all of these degrees. How can you're not lazy. You're like the least lazy person I know, but I genuinely still carry that with me, that I think of myself as a lazy person. I am still incredibly triggered when I think someone is treating me like I'm stupid. I don't deal with that well. Better, but not well. I was angry for so long. I carried, and short fuse, quick trigger, for so long. So that victimization carries for a really long time. And there are a lot of things that set it off and make it worse along the way. And so that's going to kind of get to sort of the uselessness of things people say. When you say to somebody, I could just never imagine that you would be abused. I should just let you know, good intentions notwithstanding, that is one of the crappiest things I have ever heard. And it makes me feel really ashamed because it says to me, I've let you down. The way that, and I'm going to speak a little more universally for abused folks in general, because of the few people that I know that have gone through this and shared that with me, we all sort of agree on this. It makes us feel as though you expected us to be here and we performed here. We didn't quite make the mark. You would have thought more of us than to let that happen or stay in that situation. I've had people say, I would never stay. If any man ever laid his hands on me, I'd be out. First, I would like to praise you on your clairvoyance. Good on you that you can see into a completely horrible, despicable, and frightening future and know exactly how you would respond to that. I'd also like to say you're full of crap. And God bless, if God forbid that ever happens to you, and you do, and you should, to be abundantly clear, anyone ever does any of the aforementioned things to you, there isn't an apology that makes those things better. There isn't an I'm sorry without something else. I'm not saying people can't be rehabilitated. I do believe they can. But they've got to do the work, and the work is not in the I'm sorry. So, and you don't have to sit around and wait for it and continue to be abused while they figure their stuff out. They need to go do that on their own. It's kind of like being an alcoholic or a drug addict. You go and you do rehab, and you need to be away from the relationship. You can't be in it. It's the same notion. So somebody who does those things, even if they say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that, you should leave. You really should. And if you can't afford to, find some local resources that will help you. And don't be afraid to tell your family. And don't be afraid to tell a friend. You would be amazed at the people who would take you in to get you out of that situation. You're not less than, and you don't need to put up with it. So you should leave. However, for those of you to whom this has never happened, pronouncing to the world that you know you would just makes us all feel like crap that we didn't. And now you've become one less person that when that next person finds themselves being abused, you have become someone they will not talk to. So if you believe that about yourself, that's great. Keep it to yourself. Because it just makes us feel bad. I had this conversation. I started getting a little bolder about this, and I shared a friend of mine is a dad, and he has, I think, 2 or 3 daughters. And they're getting to that preteen age, 11, 12 years old, and you know boys are going to be in their future. And they're beautiful girls. And he's pride and joy of them. And I said, if you ever want help talking to them about abuse and how to be mindful of it and avoid that in their lives, please let me know. I would be more than happy to either sit with and talk to them with you or to just give you some tips on talking to them. And his reaction was really interesting. His reaction was, and I actually have gotten this reaction from others, it was, we don't need that. That's not going to be a problem for us. I don't even know what that means. Now, sometimes I get this from men where they're like, that's not going to be a problem because they're gun-toting men. And they're just like, I'll just kill them. A, probably you won't. B, definitely you shouldn't. And C, that just is not helpful. And once again, without meaning to, you sort of demean me in my situation by saying, yeah, I'm not going to have the problem you have. That's a you problem, not a we problem. And I got news for you. Have you watched the television? I shared this conversation, and I have been approached by at least 3 or 4 people that I was going before doing this, when I told folks I was doing it, one of whom shared a story that was heartbreaking to me, that someone that he knows died as a result of domestic violence. And we hear about that on the news, but this was in my face. Countless other people were like, yes, this has either happened to me or I know someone whom it's happened to. And I've talked to a lot of people who don't even know they're being abused, that just don't realize. Because again, you feed the reality that you can handle, and that's just not happening to you. So this notion that that's not going to happen to me is not helpful. And quite frankly, don't go killing somebody. Don't think that just because you're a big strong man and you are going to protect your little girl, and I'm not anti-gun, I'm not pro-gun, that's not what this conversation is about, but answering violence with violence, number one, does not solve the problem. It is just propagating the problem. We're just moving it forward. And we kind of have a lot of that. We are being abused psychologically every day with what goes on in the news. Every day it's coming in. We have to talk about the effect that that has, the anger that it's creating. And I say that this, I want to empower young women because statistically speaking, this is more of a young woman's problem. But first of all, we're a lot more comfortable with same-sex relationships than 20 years ago. And that's a good thing. But I got news for you. If men are the big abusers, then that means in gay relationships, there are men being abused. And women, whether they are in a homosexual relationship or a heterosexual relationship, can be just as abusive. Believe me, I was abusive. I put my hands on another person and I spoke vile things, and that carried forward. I spoke vile things. I had a second husband, so I went through a divorce, had this relationship, and got remarried. I spoke vile things to my second husband, not constantly, but I did, because I had opened the door to that, and that became okay in my life. And I didn't even know that I had done it, and I didn't even know I was doing it at the time. It carries on. The victimizing goes on and on and on, unless we all take some ownership. And so that's why it's important for me that I own my stuff. I did that. I need my own forgiveness. I have prayed about it and I have sought that, and I'm not going to go try to contact my abuser and get it from him. But I'm not without sin in the whole environment, and we all have to sort of take some ownership of that. To that end, I'm going to recommend a book. I get no money for this. Lots of, DVD. That's what happens when you go live. So lots of you have heard of this book. A very good friend of mine named Ridge recommended this book to me over a decade ago now, The 5 Love Languages. And when I was going through my second divorce, he recommended that book to me. And I've read it multiple times. And the reason I'm suggesting it is, I had great parents. I have great parents. My mom is still with us. She's a great mom. So this isn't a slam on anything, but I think that our culture has changed a lot. And the two things that I could have used more of as I moved into life are better budgeting skills and how to love myself. So as your teenage sons and daughters are getting ready to date, and maybe they're seeking your thoughts and your opinions on that, I would ask them to read that book first. And I would have an open dialogue with them about it. It's the best book that I have found, and it's an easy read. And if you read it with them, I genuinely believe that a teenager can handle that conversation. Probably not as young as 12, but 14, I think you can do it. Because part of the weakness and part of what makes someone really susceptible to being taken advantage of by somebody else is if they don't know themselves. Empower your children to know how they want to be loved, because if they can identify that this is what love means to me, this is what I'm looking for, this is what makes me feel better about myself, this is what I enjoy, this is what I'm looking for, this is how I feel whole, it becomes so much easier to identify when that's not what they're getting, and when they're getting something so very opposite of that. And when you're trying to help somebody to not be that abusive person, we never want to think about that. Our children are great and we love them and they're fabulous. My kid would never hit somebody else. My kid would never put somebody else down. Well, everybody who's abused somebody is somebody's kid. They are not all bad parents. They weren't even all necessarily bad kids, but something happened, some way their problem solving went crazy. And if those kids get shown what love is like and know how to ask for it and know how to advocate for it and know how to care about themselves, then maybe we can change the dialogue. So maybe instead of saying, if anyone ever hits my kid, I'm going to shoot them, and therefore we don't have a problem. Maybe instead of thinking from a violent place, we can change the dialogue and try to think about this from a place of love and say, this is all because love and anger are getting very screwed up. So let's take the anger out of the conversation and let's move the love forward. And let's talk about what love actually looks like and what it means to think something of ourselves, and always letting your kids know where the safe places are. Even if it's not you, you're going to have to accept that it is not always going to be you, but empowering them to go somewhere. And I think that's where the conversation is moving forward. If you see yourself, I mean, you know what the signs are. If you see somebody talking to somebody disrespectfully, you can have that conversation that that's not okay. You can set that limit and say to that person who's being spoken to that way that that's not okay. I caution you, people want to stand up for someone. They see abuse happening in public and they want to go and confront the abuser. Please don't do that. There is a ton of statistics that support the fact that by doing that, you are now putting that woman in danger. Because embarrassing the abuser in that way publicly, he will take that out on her later. But if you can find a way to slip her a note and just say, hey, I'm here for you, call me. I saw what happened. You're not alone. Call me. Anything that you can do to help her know that she's not by herself, or him, that he is not by himself, I highly encourage. Because people need to know that they're not alone. They need to know that they matter more than dog poop. Because I didn't know that for a really long time. It takes a long time to transition from being a victim to being a survivor. And all I can say to anybody who's out there who will ever listen to this, who happens to be a victim, don't be afraid of the V word. It doesn't have to mean weakness. It's just what someone has told you it means in your own mind. Victim is just what you are until you're safe. And you're a survivor every day. Every day you wake up alive, you've survived. So don't hide in shame and don't live in fear. You're surviving every single day. And once you're safe and you can work through all of the rubbish that has come out of that, you will truly embrace your survivorship and move on and love again, and more importantly, love yourself, because the anger and the guilt that you feel is almost always directed at you. I have been mad for the better part of 2 decades at the person talking to you right now. I am mad at what I lost. I am mad at my own ignorance and self-righteousness that kept me in a dangerous situation. I am mad at what I did to other people because I refused to deal with my own stuff. I am mad that I will never know the woman I was meant to be before that fateful day that happened. I'm less mad than I was, but I'm still a little mad. I'm working through it. But I consider myself a survivor, wholeheartedly. And I am happy to be there for anybody who ever needs somebody in a moment like that. So those are kind of my parting thoughts. That's kind of my whole presentation. I'm checking my notes, but I think I kind of covered everything that I wanted to cover. Thanks, Carrie. I appreciate all the supportive comments, and I agree with you, Faith, shame is a crippling emotion. You guys have been awesome to have supported me during this. I really appreciate it, and I would ask that you share this with as many people as you can, because we're not really talking about this. And not honestly, not about the long-term effects, not in terms of how hard it is to form a new relationship when this is the baggage that you're carrying, not in terms of how little people that continue to be able to trust themselves. We don't talk about the fallout of all of this. So I would love to keep this dialogue going, and I would really like to see it happening for young people. I want to see this generation stop embracing violence as the answer and fear, and start to see that looking at love from a different perspective might be the answer. Sorry, that was my timer, so I didn't talk for forever, because I can talk for forever. So I don't have anything else. I'm going to put my glasses on for just a quick second. They get a glare, so I wasn't wearing them, but some folks are typing some things in. So I thank you. Okay, that's wonderful. I appreciate all of the feedback. I'm going to take these off because the glare bugs me. I'm going to go ahead and end then, and I thank you all very much for tuning in. I appreciate you taking time out of your Wednesday, and feel free to reach out anytime. Don't feel like you have to look away just because you know this about somebody. I think that that's part of what keeps it in the closet. So you know this about me, and it's just a part of me as much as I have curly hair and pierced ears. And it's okay to talk about, and it's okay not to talk about. So just don't hide from someone when you know this has happened. That keeps it going. So thank you all very much. I appreciate your support, and you all have a wonderful and blessed evening. Good night.